Thanks very much. Welcome. Thanks for coming this afternoon. I appreciate it. It's a little bit daunting to be having to have that rack card on my desk for the last God knows how many months, saying that I'm one of the most talented management professionals in the world. I never knew. Who knew? Look, there's two more right there. Anyway, it also, as I was preparing for this presentation, it dawned on me that I had just completed 4 decades in the hotel business. That's a long time, isn't it? Long time. So 40 years, actually closer to 41, but 40 years in the hotel business, and I'm going to tell you about every one of them. Actually, so I hope you're in for the long haul. But it's hard to believe, actually. You're probably thinking it's a little hard to believe that I could have been in that long, as young as I look. So whoops, there we go. Whoops, where is it again? I love this machine. Yeah, that's not me, of course. That's the E-Trade baby. I love the E-Trade baby. And the reason you know that is because cell phones weren't invented back then. So this thing, I love this thing. Look at that already. Already we're having a problem with that. Which other button? This one? This one? This one? Okay. That doesn't work. The roll works. Okay. So we're here for a long time. The topic here is supposed to be leadership, and I promised Margaret that I would stay on topic. So I'm going to actually go through my career, not a day at a time, but go through it and maybe pick out some leaders that had an effect on me and what I learned in the first part of my career, and hopefully what I was able to put into practice in the latter part of my career. It became evident to me that trust is a big issue when it comes to leadership, and it's a two-way trust. And what I mean by that is that I expect to trust my employees, and I would hope that they trust me. And the way that you gain that, of course, is by being fair with them and showing them that you can be a good leader. So two-way trust. We don't have to go too far back to get an example of trust and leadership. And in this particular instance, this was the federal election last week. My apologies to Elizabeth May for not appearing in this picture, but it wasn't so much who we trusted the most, but the Canadian public who we mistrusted the least. And that probably was the fellow on the right top corner there. You probably have to edit this out, which is okay. And that's the guy that maybe we mistrusted the most. It's a good picture, though. Anyway, so we're all the way back to the 70s, and most of you weren't born probably in the 70s, but I was, and they were known as the disco years, but I didn't just pick that because of that, but it also had some significance to me, and I'll get to that in a little bit. And here we go again. Okay. You know, I have a line for this. I go to a lot of conferences and stuff, and when this sort of stuff happens to somebody else, I always say it's incredible that we can put a man on the moon, but we can't handle audiovisual. And that seems to be happening this time. Oh, that's just the picture I threw in there. That's not me. That's John Travolta. We looked a lot alike at the time. In the 70s, I started my career at Jasper Park Lodge, and I had no intentions of going into the hotel business at all. In fact, like Kimberly, who's here today, thanks for coming, Kimberly, I had applied to Ryerson to take journalism. I know, who knew? I didn't copy that from you, it's true. I'm not lying about it. And there were some complications between the requirements between Quebec and Ontario. I was born in Quebec and grew up in Quebec, and Ryerson, of course, is in Ontario. And I found out quite late in the game that the requirement in Ontario didn't meet the education that I had in Quebec, so I couldn't go to Ryerson to take journalism. So I went to Europe instead and had a great time. It was way more fun than taking journalism, probably. So I worked at Jasper Park Lodge, started February the 4th, 1970. I don't know why I remember that. I think it's because I had just spent the coldest month of my life in Edmonton. It never got above 30 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit for the whole month. And I had to spend it with my sister, but that's okay. You might have to edit that one out too. They don't edit? Oh, Kimberly's already watched herself online. Okay. How was it, by the way? Good? That's great. I did end up going to Ryerson for hotel management, not for a long time, and I'll fill you in on that. I also worked at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. I was a management trainee for CN Hotels, and I worked at the Hotel Nova Scotia, and this all happened in the 70s. They were very formative years for me. So I'm not going to trust that wheel anymore. Don't trust my fingers either. So Jasper Park Lodge started as a busboy, left-hand side, was promoted rapidly to server, bartender, did that. And somewhere in between there, I was a room service waiter. And room service, that took sort of all your trust with the room service manager who would tell you that first of all, they delivered all the stuff on bicycles. I don't know if everybody knows that, or probably not. It was a long time ago. Maybe they still do. Do they? I think maybe they do. They have carts? Well, see, that's no fun. So they dressed us up in these starched tablecloth type monkey suits with epaulets and stuff, and you got on your bike at the top of the ramp, and they told you that it would be okay to load it up with a bunch of glassware and Coke and mix and stuff, and sort of go down the ramp, which is on about a 45-degree angle, take a button hook left, go down by the lake, and take it to room whatever, 345 or whatever it was, knowing all the time that if you ever fell, you'd cut yourself to ribbons and probably not survive. So you became an excellent shot putter doing this, because if you were going down right away, I mean, take that tray and fire it as far as you can. And they didn't even charge you for that, and that was fun. The front, and then of course front desk. I was a front desk clerk, and we had a blast doing that. There was a bunch of guys on the front desk, sorry girls, but a bunch of guys on the front desk, and we sort of took turns being the front office manager, which was great fun. Anyway, so in between that, somewhere along the line, Jasper was a seasonal operation. They closed down in the winter for several of those years. And so that's me on the left at Ryerson. And I went for a year actually at Ryerson, and there were complications again about student loans and so on. I think he did say that I graduated from I didn't. That's okay. I learned it all by myself. You can do this. You don't have to go to school. Anyway, so you can edit that one? Okay. And then the lovely picture on the right, I spent a couple of seasons, or winter seasons, at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, which was a CN hotel. And just to draw a parallel here, CN hotels, where it became CP hotels, became Fairmont hotels. So at the end of the day, I'm a Fairmont guy. Don't tell anybody. I'm sort of the non-corporate guy out of the 5 speakers, so although I'm wearing my corporate type suit. Anyway, these lovely ladies on the right-hand side, I worked a couple of jobs at the Queen Elizabeth. I was martini boy, and that was fun. I used to serve these bomber martinis to these guys, businessmen, in the Beaver Club, which was the restaurant at the Queen Elizabeth, and they'd come in, they'd pile back about 2 or 3 of these martinis and go back to work. Doesn't happen much these days. And then the other job that I had was in the kitchen in the service bar, and the Queen Elizabeth, and this is a long time ago, right? They had a show lounge basically, and they did Vegas style shows in that lounge. And right outside the service bar, which was in the kitchen, was where the girls, mustered basically, got together so that they could go out on stage at the Queen Elizabeth. So that was pretty exciting when you're only 21 years old. There was a lot of stuff to look at there. So, wish I could still be there. So disco days, I put that in because a couple of friends of mine, we were at Jasper, and we got this fabulous idea that we could open a staff disco, because that's what you called all the bars then, was discos. And there was this unused building in the middle of the staff quarters at Jasper Park Lodge, and it was a beautiful log building, and it was just sitting there doing nothing. We thought, why wouldn't we open a staff bar there? And so we went to the manager. We'll call him Mr. K. I'm not allowed to use any names. Mr. K, and we made a proposal to him to open this staff bar, and much to our delight and surprise, he said yes. And the rest of his management team, the executive team, they hated the idea. I mean, hated it, right? They thought that was stupid. How could you ever trust a few employees, basically, to open a bar and run it? And but he sort of said, okay, let's just see what happens. And so we worked very hard, and we polished the whole building, and we carpeted it, and we cut out dance floors, and we built a DJ booth, and we filled up fridges, and we shined this and we shined that, and it was gorgeous. Well, it wasn't gorgeous, but it'll do. There was no bathrooms, but you know, there was a sink. Anyway, so it was opening day, and I remember it was a gorgeous day, and in walked. We invited, of course, Mr. K and the executive team and their wives to come and witness this event, this fabulous event, and they walked in, and Mr. K was first, and he was an enormous, big guy, tall guy, 6'7" German fellow. And he came in, and there was a beam as he came in the door just over top, and nobody else could reach it except him at 6'7". And he hopped up and swung back and forth on the beam, and he had this fabulous smile on his face. And he jumped down, and he looked at the rest of the executive team, and he went, "Told ya," like that. So that was a trust that he had in us and we had in him. And I ended up buying out the other two guys and operated this disco for several years. So it was a good learning experience for me. And then we get to the other half of the decade. Oh my God, we've only been through half a decade. We're going to be here for a while. So I have Mr. K to thank for this too. So he and the director of what we used to call personnel at the time. Now it's HR, or it's even something else. What do you call it in your hotel, Kimberly? People resources, I forgot. Okay, so they knew that I hadn't, that I had only gone to school for a year. And apart from the financial part that I couldn't go back to Ryerson to complete that hotel management degree, I couldn't figure out why the guy who was teaching us, with all due respect to all the academics in the room, the guy who was teaching us wasn't managing the Four Seasons. So, you know, it's one of those things. Anyway, so they put together a management trainee program for me, and I'm forever in the debt of CN Hotels. It was an 18-month program. Most of it was done in Winnipeg, and some of it in Edmonton and other places. But it was a very in-depth program, and I got to work in all the departments, so housekeeping and front desk and accounting, and even the kitchen, actually. So I can still butcher a béarnaise sauce like nobody else. But it taught me a lot, and was certainly as good for me as school, which is not to say that you shouldn't go to school. Oh, you are going to school. So it was from there I was ready for my first sort of kick at management, and was shipped off to the Hotel Nova Scotian in Halifax, where I became the assistant front office manager for a very short time, and then the front office manager. And that was an interesting experience. We reported to two general managers, both of whom I learned a fair amount from, although they didn't seem to do much except smoke. They smoked a lot. The little French guy, he smoked Gitan in his office, and a little British guy, and he smoked Rothmans one after the other. I'm sure, and he's not around anymore. So front office manager, just the one thing that stands out in my mind, it was an interesting time, and I thought I got along well with the staff, and they liked me and I liked them. And the one harrowing experience I had as the front office manager was we were overbooked by a considerable amount one day, and I had to make a decision as to whether to bump. You know what bump means? Displace, right? So you're overbooked, you got to displace them. And I was going to either do that 25 times with individuals, or I was going to pick a bus tour, and I was going to bump them just all at once and get it over with. And unfortunately, there was no cell phones and stuff, as you couldn't get in touch with the tour company. And so I ended up having to get on the bus and drive with them, because we couldn't, The whole city was full, so they weren't going a block. They were going 17 miles out to a motel called the Blue Nose Motel outside of Halifax, and that was not a fun experience for me. So I decided not to do that anymore, and became, no, I thought I should diversify, because, yeah, and anybody tells you food and beverage is more fun, it's not. But anyway, I thought I should diversify, and so a position as assistant banquet manager came up, and I took that. And then I did learn a lot. The fellow that ran, Mr. H, he ran that department, a big florid-faced German guy, smoked cigars. Everybody smoked. Anyway, and he was the most organized professional I have ever seen. He was the food and beverage guy, the banquet guy, and the Hotel Nova Scotian had a banquet capacity of about 12 to 1,400. And so we did a banquet or a royal dinner for the Queen and the Queen Mum. And of course, if they're coming, then the Premier's coming and the Prime Minister's coming, and there's security all over the place. And this guy had it organized down to exactly where the potted plants went. I mean, he had stencils and he drew all the tables and he said, okay, this is where the piano goes. Then he'd call a meeting, and everything went off without a hitch. And it was a fabulous experience to see how being organized can take you in the right direction. So organization and delegation, obviously you can't do it yourself, and you better be organized. So that's one of the leadership things. So now we move on to the 80s, thank God. Lost in the 80s, it was a bit of a weird decade for me. And I had 3 successive assistant managers' jobs with Delta Hotels. First in Campbell River, the teeming metropolis of Campbell River. And I moved out west. I got married that year too. I had met my first wife, my only wife actually, but my first wife, I have to be careful and I'll tell you why in a little bit, but I had met my first wife at the Hotel Nova Scotian actually. She worked for me in reservations. Gee, that never happens. And so out to Campbell River, and I'm the assistant manager of the huge Delta Discovery Inn, I think 80 cinder block rooms and a big pub. Loved it there. Loved it there. And then ended up being transferred to Prince George, which was sort of like moving to San Francisco, actually, after you've lived in Campbell River. It's a big step up. And running the Delta Inn of the North, which at the time was a going concern and had a lot of food and beverage. We had a fine dining room, had a huge pub, which we had big name sort of bands in, and Japanese restaurant, a show lounge, coffee shop, etc. Way disproportionate food and beverage. Anyway, did fine there. In Campbell River, I worked for a Mr. P, and in Prince George, I worked for Mr. P also, but he was JP. They were totally different guys. First one was sort of very serious and smoked a lot. And Mr. JP in Prince George, he was really funny. It was like working with John Cleese, and he smoked a lot too. Both those gentlemen, unfortunately, have made their celestial migration now, which is a really nice way of putting it, but they're no longer with us. So Coast Hotels took over those 2, Prince George and Campbell River, and I and JP, who was still alive at the time, ended up going to Whistler to open the Delta Mountain Inn, right? The Delta Mountain Inn. I always look at Kimberly because she's the Delta girl. So the Delta Mountain Inn, which I believe now is a Hilton. It's a Hilton now. But it was the first, basically, it was the first chain hotel. It was the first major hotel to be built in Whistler. It was built before the Chateau Whistler and so on. And things were a little bit wacky there. We had a blast. I had a lot of fun doing it, and it was fun opening that hotel. But before that, we actually JP and I went to help open the Delta Lakeside in Penticton. And between those 2 hotels, I've got to tell you, what a learning experience that is. The Delta team, and I have to give them tremendous credit, they have opening a hotel down to a science. I mean, it is a science. They've got everything timed. They've got timelines for everything. They've got everything ordered. There's responsibilities for everybody. Everybody knows what they have to do, and you are going to open on time. And we did in both cases. Whistler being a bit different. Not a lot of hotel people involved. The owners wanted to get involved, and there wasn't much money, and the economy wasn't great. And in fact, they came up with some pretty weird stuff, like where, you know, if you didn't pay for parking or if they found that your car didn't have a ticket on it downstairs in the parking lot, they wanted us to attach barrels to the car. Big barrels, like this. We attach them to the car. Well, you can imagine these people would come up and go, "You get that? God, well, anyway, it was a bit weird, and things were sort of going off the rails a little bit. JP was let go, and it was becoming very corporate. And I was sort of joined at the hip with JP. And so eventually I found myself out of work. And that wasn't good because I believe my ex-wife was pregnant. and I didn't have a job. But it didn't take long. I did end up getting a job and ended up at the huge Whistler Resort and Club. There we go. Yeah, it wasn't the highest or the best point in my career, but you know, you do what you got to do to put food on the table. And I worked at the Resort and Club. It was my first general manager's job. Unfortunately, I didn't have anybody to general manage. It was just sort of me. I, you know, learned how to clean pools and, you know, unthaw pipes and stuff like that. But it taught me a lot. I folded laundry, you know. But all was not lost, because during that time, that last few years, both my children were born in Whistler. They were actually born in North Vancouver because you couldn't be birthing no babies in Whistler. They didn't have the facilities. So on the left is my son. He's 27 in June, Alex, and he lives in Vancouver, and he's a graphic designer. And then there's my gorgeous daughter, who surprised me by being here today. She's just over here in the front row, Courtney, who is going into her 4th year at Vancouver Island University in interior design. Isn't that right, Courtney? There you go. They're not in jail. Neither of them ever went to jail, and they didn't hang around the 7-Eleven. I think that's a remarkable achievement on my part. So now we're into the 90s, strangely enough. What time is it, for God's sake? Just kidding. The Victorian era. So at the end of the 80s, I had enough of the Whistler Resort and Club, and I was going to leave there and start an accounting type business, bookkeeping business with a friend of mine who I'd met who wanted to do that. We're going to sell our house in Whistler and move to Squamish. Like, wow. I think about that now and I go, what was I thinking? Anyway, I wasn't that good at accounting, didn't want to live in Squamish, but besides that. So luckily, one of the principals at the Resort and Club, another Mr. K actually, came to me and he said, really? Really? You're going to do that? You're going to move? You're going to move to Squamish? Really? He says, well, I got a better idea. He says, why don't you come? We just bought a hotel in Victoria. Why don't you come and manage that? And I said, well, what do you mean you just bought it? He says, well, it's closed down for a while, but we're going to reopen it. And I said, when? He says, well, like in a couple of months. I said, oh, great. So I said, but then I thought about it for about 35 seconds, and I thought, okay, that's where I'm going. I mean, like, you know, I've trained for this all my life, and I have a brand new family, and I'm going to, you know, take a shot at a bookkeeping thing in Squamish? I don't think so. So off to Victoria and to the Best Western Carleton Plaza, and I sort of commuted back and forth a little bit, and I knew we were in a bit of trouble when I sort of found out that nobody had ordered soap and towels and, you know, little things that you need to run the hotel. And so we got busy with that, and that's where the Delta experience came in very handy for me. And I was able to sit down and take that. I already had the template from the Lakeside and from Whistler, put that into practice and did a timeline and said, okay, we're going to do this by this time and this by this time and this by this time, and we're going to open. And I, of course, am still at the Victoria Regent, but we'll get to that in a bit in plenty of detail. So the Best Western Carleton Plaza, I had to reopen the hotel. It had been closed for about 6 months. It was unionized. It was run down for sure. I was asked to find somebody to lease the restaurant. I was asked to help decertify the union. Of course, you can cut that out too. I don't think you're allowed to decertify the union, but you're convincing somebody that they should no longer be unionized. I wasn't allowed to hire any new staff. And this was summer. So not allowed to hire any new staff because that would influence the decertification vote. And there had been very little marketing. And so we were in trouble. And I knew we were in trouble. I didn't like the way things were going. There wasn't a great deal of trust on my part for what was happening out of head office in Vancouver. Little deals going on that I wasn't privy to, and so I started to look pretty quickly. I liked where I was living. Victoria's nice, but I didn't particularly like serving continental breakfast for half the day every day. So I started looking around, and about 10 months later, I was only at the Carlton Plaza for about 10 months, I landed the job at the Victoria Regent, and I love the Victoria Regent. Obviously, I've been there a long time. And it's a fabulous property, and it's got great views, and it's a pretty easy property to run. I'll give you some facts. When I was hired at the Regent, I was hired by the chairman of the Strata Council and the board of directors, and he was an airline pilot that was going to retire, and he basically said to me, he says, after about 3 or 4 months, he said, finally, I found somebody. He says, I want it out of this building. He says, I want to sell my unit. He says, I got other things to do. And I've been the chairman for ages and ages. And finally, I found somebody that can run the place. And so, indeed, he sold his unit about 6 months after I started. And we're still friends to this day. But so a few facts about the Regent. Not that this is a commercial for the Victoria Regent, but it was one of the first strata hotels in British Columbia. So there was lots in Whistler. But this was built in 79 and 80, so it's been around a long time. I report to a board of directors for the hotel portion and to a strata council for the building portion, which is a little complicated, and there was also trust issues there, and we talk about how you turn that around, and a lot of the residents didn't really trust the rental pool, and they thought that the rental pool was incurring a lot of expenses that they were paying for, and so there was some animosity there, and I'm glad to say that there's none now. There's 57 suites in total, 36 in the hotel pool. So we have some residents. We have a team usually of about 35 people who are engaged and loyal, and I say that the numbers speak for themselves. 20% have been there more than 5 years. 30% have been there more than 10 years, and 20% more than 20 years. So if you do that math, and I had to look at it and go, whoops, what's that? 70% of the staff have been there more than 5 years, which is remarkable in this industry, I can assure you. So, and hopefully that in some way is something about me. But we were also voted number 16 in Canada by the 2010 Condé Nast Reader's Choice Awards. Believe it or not. Just saying, you reading the just saying part? I know. Ahead of the Four Seasons, Toronto and Vancouver, and that's true. You can look it up. Go onto our website, go onto our website, and it'll list all the hotels there. And I thought there was going to be some Fairmont people here, but there's not, thank God. So we're ahead of a whack of Fairmonts too. So more of the 90s in Victoria. I went out and basically built or got a piece of the long stay market, which was very important to us for about. Still important to us, but after 20 years, it's starting to lose its momentum, I guess. The long stay market is something that I don't think is going to be around for a long time. We call them snowbirds and so on, but people that come for a month or 2 or 3, we were the perfect property for them. Basically kitchens and big suites and so on. And we still do a lot of that business, but it's certainly declining. So we're going to have to look at ways to shore that up. And tourism, of course, was booming in the 90s in Victoria. New hotels were going up, but it wasn't overbuilt yet. Ocean Point was going up, Grand Pacific was going up, Magnolia went up later, I guess, probably in 98, thanks. So new hotels were going up, but it wasn't overbuilt yet, and still very popular with certainly American tourists. And things were going along great until about the middle of the decade, and then came the big D. And by the big D, I mean the divorce. So we had the divorce. Yikes. The big D, yeah. So that was a bit tumultuous. And sometime later, something else happened, but we'll just go to this slide first. So just a couple little nuggets for you. You can write these down. No, don't write them down. I'm just kidding. But leadership to me is building the right team. So we got rid of I purged the place of all the people that thought they were just there on a little stopover on their way to being nuclear physicists, and built a pretty solid team, and surrounded myself with what I think are good people. And our management people have been there a long time. All of them, in fact, or 3 of them certainly longer than me, or longer than I have been. And of course, finding the right partner if you're lucky enough to do that. And I was certainly lucky enough to do that. And so this is Michelle Lesage. She is my partner, my confidant, my inspiration for the last 15 years or so. And she, in her own right, is a leader, a motivator, and she's blessed with common sense, and I'll come back to that in a second. So my daughter can attest to that, can't you? There you go. So Michelle, she started in the hotel business at about 16. She's 26 now. No, I'm just kidding. She's older than that. She's a lot older than that. Anyway, no, she's not. So she was 14 years at the Chateau Victoria as the assistant manager at the Chateau Victoria. And last May, about a year ago exactly today, she took the job as the general manager of the Westerly Hotel in Courtenay. And so we drive back and forth every day, and it's really tiring. But no, we don't. We sort of go back every weekend, back and forth every weekend. So I say she's blessed with common sense. I'll give you an example, a little story. We travel a lot, and we were on a trip down to California, to Napa Valley and San Francisco, and we both have a love of wine, and we'll get to that in a bit too. So and the weather was horrible. It was February, I think. Everything happened in February. But anyway, in February, and it was pouring, and it poured in Napa, it poured everywhere, and it poured for days and days on end. And we had a reservation. We finally got to San Francisco, and I was driving a Standard, and I'm, coming up the hills, I'm just about like this, because it's very difficult to drive in San Francisco, especially in the rain and on the hills. And we get to our destination, which is the Hotel Monaco, very cool hotel in San Francisco. And we pull up to the door, and at the Hotel Monaco, their doormen all wear fedoras, and they're dressed like the Blues Brothers. I don't know if you're familiar with the Blues Brothers. Everybody's looking at me with blank faces. But anyway, they're not that old, for God's sakes, the Blues Brothers. Anyway, fedoras and sunglasses and coats and stuff. They come out, they ask if they can take the car. I said, please, I never want to see it again. Please take the car. And we go off to our suite, and we're sitting there relaxing finally and having a cocktail probably. And there's boom boxes in all the rooms, like little CD entertainment centers. And we're sitting there relaxing, and from the next door, the volume starts to go up and up and up, and I'm getting crankier and crankier and crankier, and I'm going to call the front desk, and I probably even pounded on the wall just a little bit. Anyway, and Michelle, of course, in all her wisdom and common sense, looks at me and goes, really? Anyway, so she goes out our door, and she looks around, and she goes like this, and I wonder what she's doing, and she comes back, and she goes over to the phone, and she picks up the phone, she dials 7 and the room number, and she says, hi, I'm calling from the front desk. She says, we've had some complaints about noise in your room. I was wondering if you could possibly turn that down for us. And sure enough, no more problems the whole time. Yeah, I wish I was her, but I'm not. Okay, we do share a lot of the same philosophies, though, Michelle and I, and we talk about it a lot, and they're very simple. Very simple. They're not complicated sort of rules of engagement and stuff like that. To us, hotel management rule number one is we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And what I mean by that is not only do you treat people like ladies and gentlemen, it's a Ritz-Carlton thing, we stole it. Not only do we treat people like ladies and gentlemen, but we expect that if we treat them as ladies and gentlemen, they should treat us like ladies and gentlemen too. And I won't tolerate people treating my staff like garbage for no reason. So that's another thing, you got to stand up for your staff. So that hotel management rule number one, it was way easier with the clicker, but there you go. Hotel management, therefore it stands to reason that we are not us guys serving you guys. We do not grab you guys a drink. That's the new one, grab. Grab you guys a drink, and we do not grab your guys' bill. You guys is verboten in my hotel, and it's verboten in Michelle's hotel too. Nobody says you guys, and if they call a guest or guests you guys, I guarantee you that one of our staff will be all over them in a heartbeat, and it will not happen. So, and if you Google you guys, that's what comes up, by the way. Interestingly enough, I hope I don't have to protect their identity either. Hotel management rule number 3, very simple. I told you it was simple. Hire the smile and train the skill. I'm not talking about management here. I'm not talking about you people as you graduate. If you're hiring a manager, there has to be obviously a skill set there and so on. But we're not asking people in most cases to repair the Boeing 747. You know, what we're asking is that you check people in, that you serve them food, that you clean their rooms, and that you be nice to them. I want people to be engaged with the guests all the time. And if you're not, you won't be working for me very long, I can assure you of that. And the guests in our hotel, and I say to these people, as I don't do interviews really. I mean, I'll sit down and chat with somebody for 10 minutes. I don't know what the 10 pertinent questions are to sort of find out what is in their inner psyche. I really just want to meet them. And so I want to sit down with them for about 10 minutes, and by the end of that 10 minutes, I got a pretty good idea as to whether I like them, don't like them, want them working for me, or don't want them working for me. And all I ask is that when the guests walk by, and they're going to walk by these people up to 10 times a day, and they want to engage those people, then I want them to be on stage all the time. I want them to smile and be genuine. So pretty simple. I was talking to my buddy Scott Hoadley last week, and he said, and we were talking about this very subject, and he says, this is what I tell everybody that I'm going to hire, or that I'm interviewing. And I thought it was profound. So once the guest's head hits the pillow and the eyes are closed, all hotels look the same. Brilliant. Is that brilliant? Really. It's only the experience and the interaction with the team that sets the hotels apart. Scott said I could use that and take credit for it, but I didn't. So, and travel, wherever you can. Travel, we learn so much from traveling, and I bashed Fairmont before I didn't mean it, but we travel a lot. We love to stay in good hotels. We learn from staying in good hotels. We don't just check into a hotel and sort of close our eyes and that's the end of it. We take notes and we look around and we say what works, what doesn't work. We take them back to our properties, and if we can put them into place in the properties, we do. And you also learn what you shouldn't do. So just a few of the hotels that the Fairmont hotels that we've stayed in and love. Sutton Place also in Vancouver, one of our favorites. And then we've traveled extensively in Europe, and nothing can teach you more than travel, I don't think. Well, I suppose. But we stayed at the Chateau at Moet and Chandon, which is the champagne house in France. It was just an absolutely amazing experience. And stayed at the Hotel Pic, which is in the Rhone Valley in France. And I can tell you, I can tell you what the amenities were in the bathrooms. I can tell you every bite we had for dinner. It was the most amazing night I've ever spent. And they have a restaurant that was a 3-star Michelin. It's not easy, as you know, to become a 3-star Michelin. It was downgraded to a 2-star when the father died, and the father was the chef. And his daughter took over. They do one sitting a night, starts at 8 o'clock, ends whenever, whenever you decide to leave. And she comes out, place was packed, not a seat available. It was a Tuesday night, and dinner was over, and well, dinner wasn't over, it's just an ongoing event. But she'd come out about 10 o'clock to a standing ovation, literally. Everybody in the restaurant stood up, ovation. She was signing autographs on cookbooks and stuff like that. I mean, it was an incredible experience. So you can learn a lot from traveling around, if you can afford it. Anyway, the zeros are the new millennium. The zeros, you can't call it the zeros. Isn't that weird? You can call it the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. You can't call it the zeros. It sounds stupid. And or the new millennium. So we'll call it the new millennium. And everything was just tickety-boo. It was a wonderful, wonderful time to be in the hotel business in Victoria. So happiness and prosperity forever. Okay, maybe not. Because then what happened? I mean, really, we'd just gone through the Leonardo exhibit, which are the 2 best years in Victoria. Every good year in Victoria has always been connected to the museum, by the way. Every spike. So oops, there we go. 9/11, of course, which changed the world forever and changed this business forever. The hotel business, the hospitality business, the travel business, changed it forever. If anybody ever tries to minimalize it, don't believe them. It's not true. It's changed everything. If you actually knew the figures of American travel to Canada between the years 2000 and 2008, it's decreased, I'm talking everything, cross-border day trips, everything, it's down 50%. 50% of a market of 300 million people. You're never getting that back. You can go and try and get the Danish market and the Dutch market and the Brazilian market. You're never replacing that market. So things have changed. And then we had SARS in 2003, forest fires in 2006, the recession which started in 2008, and we're still mired in it, deep in it. And we have to learn to do stuff differently. So you've got to learn to partner, you've got to learn to package, you've got to learn to control expenses, you have to learn to do anything you can to better your bottom line. And because your owners are expecting that, and they know what's going on, they understand we're in a recession, but you still have to do that. So, oh yeah, I don't know if I want to go there. What time is it? 10 to 2, okay. You do have to stand behind your staff, and there's other hotel managers in the room, and they will attest to the fact that once, twice, 2, 3 times a year, somebody accuses your staff of something, stealing usually, because all your housekeeping staff are a bunch of thieves. So that's not true, of course. So a little story I have about that. You can't collapse and agree with the guest. The guest isn't always right, so you basically stand up with your staff. You do your due diligence, and now you can audit locks and stuff like that. And you may talk to your staff and say, do you remember going into that room and so on, but you never accuse them of anything. And so one time we had this lady, and she was absolutely certain that somebody had stolen her wallet, and she had left it in the closet. Why you would ever do that's beyond me, but anyway, left her purse in the closet, and the purse was open at the top. And she was absolutely said the wallet was gone. That was true. We checked the room, and we found out who was working. We're going like, there's no way that the staff did that. And basically, so she went back to her room. She sort of smoothed things over, and we were going to deal with it further the next day. And she went back to her room, and she took a shower or bath or something, put on the bathrobe, and guess what was in the pocket? The wallet, of course. She didn't put the wallet there. The purse tipped over on the shelf, wallet fell out of the purse, went right into the bathrobe pocket. I mean, how do you do that? Anyway, but you have to stand behind your staff, and that's one of the ways of creating loyalty, of course. Training people to handle a crisis. Yes. So I love Fawlty Towers. It's the best. Has anybody seen Fawlty Towers? Everybody, it's mandatory. You have to get that. Anyway, training people to handle a crisis. In 2006, in March, we had a major fire in the hotel, similar to you. A lot of similarities, Kimberly, between your presentation and mine. We had a major fire. It was a big deal, and it burnt our Primo suite, the Regency suite, back to the walls. And this would have been me if I'd been in town on the left, but luckily that was me on the right. I was down in Seattle at a trade show, and we just had time for a game of golf, and that's where I got the call saying that we'd had this fire. And I said, well, how bad's the fire? And my assistant manager said, well, it's pretty bad. I said, well, how bad? Like dollars. Let's talk dollars. She goes, I don't know, like more than 100? More than 100,000? I go, oh my God. Okay, is everybody all right? I actually said that. That's true, Court, I did. Anyway. Anyway, so more than 100,000, well, yeah, that was an understatement. So the suite also belongs to the chairman of the board, of course, who happens to live in Seattle, so at least I didn't have to call him long distance. I could just make a local call and tell him that his room had burnt down, basically, or his suite, which is worth about $2 million. And so he was thrilled about that, and I got on a plane and came back the next day, and we had the opportunity to sort of put it back together, the final bill being $365,000, and the structure was intact. So that was sort of what it looked like after the fire, after it blew out all the windows, and that's the kitchen, and that's the kitchen now. So we had a wonderful time, that was a good experience to sort of put that back together. But the moral of this is more that for weeks afterwards, I heard from everybody, from owners, from residents, from visitors, from next door neighbors, how well the staff handled the situation. And that made me feel so good that they did all the right things. They evacuated the place, promptly. They made sure everybody was out of the building. They accounted for everybody in the building. They made arrangements that they could go to the restaurant next door and have coffee and that sort of thing. And they made sure that they all got back to their rooms in one piece. And so that was good for me. Again, I'm proud of them. And in August 2010, we had what we're calling the electrical emergency. So we blew, it's a building's 30 years old. We blew an 800 amp switch, whatever the hell that means, I don't know. I know what it means. It means that on a Friday and Saturday, we didn't have any power for most of those 2 days, and it was in August. So you can imagine how annoying it is at your house to lose the power. You got to reset all the clocks and stuff. It's terrible. But in this case, we have no elevator, right? No elevators, no power in the rooms. Luckily, it's summer. And I've got staff, as I told you, who've been there a long time, especially in housekeeping, who've been there and they're well into their 50s and getting closer to 60, and they're walking up 8 floors to clean rooms, and people carrying linens and supplies and so on, and just doing Herculean service to get through this emergency. And that is a testament also that they did that. I almost had the big jammer walking up the 8 floors. So leadership is, you see all these little leadership things in here? I'm sort of staying on topic. Right, Margaret? Thank you. Knowing who to save. Again, no names. So saving Private Ryan. So this happened a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago or so. A young fellow that was working for us and still, well, anyway, he was working for us. And he'd been there close to a year, I guess, and everybody liked him. And his name's not Ryan, and it's not even close, and it's not private. So it's Private Ryan for the sake of this story. And he knows I'm telling this story, by the way. Anyway, so everybody likes him. He's a very good employee. And then one day, Private Ryan goes AWOL. He's gone, doesn't show up for his shift. And so we're a bit miffed, a bit mad that he didn't show up for his shift. But then, when we're trying to get a hold of him, and then day 2 doesn't show up again. And now we're worried. Everybody's worried, of course. Where is Private Ryan? And we're trying to phone Private Ryan, because there are cell phones now, by the way. They're invented. So we're trying to find him. We can't track him down anywhere. And day 3 goes by, same thing. And I think we heard from him on day 4 from some rural place in BC. And obviously there'd been a bit of binging going on, and he fully expected he was going to be fired. And phoned, he was quite sheepish, and said he was coming back to Victoria the following day, and he wanted to meet with me to basically pick up his final paycheck and apologize. And I thought, where does this go? Where does this go? I mean, if I fire him, if I just fire this guy at this age, where does it go? Do I send him spiraling into some hell? Is it my fault? No, it's not my fault, of course. But does it do anybody any good? And so Private Ryan showed up, came back the next day, and he comes into my office. But in the meantime, the day before, after I heard from him, I went to my doctor, and we've been friends for a long time. He's about the same age as me, a little bit older, and he used to play rugby for Ireland, actually. So he's not the fatherly sort of guy, but a very nice, kind man. And I basically asked him to see Private Ryan when he came back, and talk to him, and if necessary, refer him to somebody that could get him some help, because I thought he was worth saving. And he did go and see the doctor, my doctor, and he did get help, I think, and he's still with us today, 3 or 4 years later, and arguably our best employee. So, nice story, eh? It was a good story. That's why I put it in there, before I start welling up or anything. So the Hotel Association, Candace touched on all this, so yes, you can read. I don't have to read it to you. I've done all that stuff. And what happens after being a director for 150 years and on the executive committee, you look around, you're sitting there in the boardroom of the Hotel Association, you look around and you're the oldest person in the room. Just like that. It's amazing. It'll happen to you one of these days, believe me. you're sort of sitting there going, no way. I can't be older than him. I mean, but you are. I'm older than Ian Powell, for God's sake. Oh, sorry, no names. Okay. Only a couple of people know Ian Powell. Oh, everybody knows Ian Powell. But anyway, so the logical next step for me, a logical next step is to be elected president of the Hotel Association, and that's interesting. Everything was going along nicely. You chair a few meetings, you kiss a few babies. I mean, it's not that difficult. And it wasn't difficult until this came in, right? So I was about 6 months from a clean getaway, and the government announces the HST's coming in. They blow up Tourism British Columbia. Does everybody know about that? Yeah, everybody's nodding. Oh, yeah. That was a popular move. Everybody thought it was the best marketing agency in the world, just about, so they chose to blow it up. And then the Hotel Association, that's me, us, we started meeting with politicians and trying to put forward a destination marketing fee so that we could fund organizations like Tourism Victoria and Tourism Vancouver, Tourism Whistler, Tourism Richmond, Tourism Nelson, you name it, all of them. And we met with a lot of opposition at that time. And they went back to the additional hotel room tax, which is the 2% tax. Everybody familiar with all that stuff, all these terms? Anyway, I've been on this file now for probably 2.5 years, and I'm getting mightily sick of it. And I was at a meeting in January where the big guns from Tourism Whistler, Tourism Vancouver, Tourism Victoria, and the related hotel associations, et cetera, came in, and we were going to find a solution to getting more marketing dollars for those three places, the Golden Triangle, if you will. And I was the one taking the heat. It was not the most fun I've ever had with my clothes on. So it was, but we came to a solution, and for that day anyway. And I thought that was a master coup, because I was dealing with people where I wasn't signing their paychecks. You know, it was we had to show some leadership, and you didn't have a lot of collateral up one way or the other. So it went well. I don't know if it's ever going to work out, but that's the way it is. So we're still working on that. And then sometime in late 06 or early 07, can you read that? Yeah, I love that. That's not true, by the way. You can have Pinot Noir if you want, with fish. And late in 06 or early in 07, I decided to take my International Sommelier Guild level 1. Level 1 is about 24 hours of classroom time. There's a simple exam, and then you get to blind taste one wine, which I got wrong. It was bizarre, but anyway. And then I decided, well, that was fun. I'll take level 2. So I did that. And level 2 is 48 hours of classroom time, goes for about over 3 months or something like that. There's a couple of essays. It's a bit more serious. There's a bit more stress involved. A couple of essays, 100 multiple choice questions, and you've got to taste 4 wines. Probably got 3 of those wrong. And then I had no intentions of taking level 3. That's just crazy. I mean, unless you're going to work in a restaurant, why would you take level 3? I've heard it was very stressful. It's very expensive, and I wasn't going to do it. And of course, you remember the motivator back there, Michelle? Yeah, Michelle. She says, "So great. Is that where you're going to leave it then? You're not going to be a sommelier, right? You just did all this stuff, and you're not going to be a sommelier. So what are they going to give you for that then? A DNF?" And I said, "What's a DNF?" She said, "Did not finish." I went, yeah, whatever. So of course I did it. Last day that you could sign up, I signed up for level 3, and it is expensive, $3,000, and you probably spend another $6,000 or more on books and wine and so on as you're doing it. It's 190 hours of classroom time, and you'd better be studying another 20 or 25 hours a week on top of that. Otherwise you're going to fail. And it's an incredible amount of knowledge. It stressed me to the max, even more than giving this speech, but did it, and the exam, to give you an idea, you do 10 essays, you do 200 multiple choice questions, you have to design your own virtual restaurant, you have to create an inventory program, you have to do a training program for the staff. What else do you have to do? Food and wine pairing, there's an exam on that. And then there's the service exam, which is one of the most terrifying things I've ever been through, because I hadn't poured a bottle of wine for anybody but myself for about 30 years, and I don't really care how I open the wine. And then there's the tasting exam, Well, that's an experience. That's an experience, I can tell you. You walk into the tasting exam, there's 25 people taking the exam, so there's 25 place settings, and there's 22 wines at each place setting. And the place smells awful. It smells great, actually, if you like wine, but it sort of smells awful. And you're supposed to sit down and taste these 22 wines and identify, write copious notes on them, and then for each wine. And then at the bottom, you're supposed to identify whether it's New World or Old World, the grape variety, the country of origin, the region in that country, and the subregion. Think you can do that? I can't either. Anyway, somehow I passed the exam, and went immediately after that. I got my diploma, and I went to Portland and took the teacher's certificate, and I've got that. And I haven't taught a class yet, but I'm mentoring the 2011 class of level 3 sommelier students. They come to the hotel every Monday, and I do a tasting with them, and I do a blind tasting. It's way more fun for me because I know exactly what the wines are, and they have to sit there and guess them, which is terrifying for them. They're going, "Oh my God, I'm going to fail." Yeah, well, you might. But no, we try and help them. Oh, there we go. That's my last thought. So I've enjoyed every minute of being in this business. It's sort of a privilege, actually, and with all privileges, there comes some sort of a duty. You take some of that knowledge, and you take what you've learned and what you've experienced, and you try and give it back. And you give it back to people, and that's what leadership is to me, is giving back. So at this stage of my career anyway, which is fairly late in my career, you never know. I might spend the next little while fleecing middle-aged ladies and doing food and wine pairings. Anyway, thank you very much. Good. I guess we're doing questions here. I don't know any answers. I'm just the little guy. A small hotel, don't know anything, don't have all the stuff down pat. But go ahead anyway. Try me.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the responsibilities you had being on the different boards?
No. Well, basically, you know, you deal a lot in the back room with the CEO. So there's on all these organizations, and particularly the BC Hotel Association, there's a CEO. That's who does all the work. They're the hired gun. They make lots of money. They make more money than I do. And so basically, you sort of you meet with them, you give them advice, they tell you where they think you should go, and that kind of stuff. And then you chair meetings, you meet with politicians, that kind of thing. You try and get your position across to well, political stuff is everything on these. They're all basically government relations boards, and so you want to meet with politicians if they'll give you the time of day. And then you chair the meetings, and one thing you learn about chairing a meeting, they don't want to hear from you. You're just the chair. You're there to run the meeting. You want the meeting to operate properly and to flow properly. They don't want to hear your opinion necessarily. You just want to make it go. So that's oversimplifying it a little bit, but that's some of the stuff. I also give away a lot of money locally here. I'm the funds allocation chairman of the Hotel Association of Greater Victoria, and have been since God knows when, and still am. So it's a forever job, but I get to sort of give donations to worthy charities and seed money to seed money to festivals and so on. Where the Hotel Association of Greater Victoria is a major sponsor of the Buskers Festival coming up in July, which we're hoping is going to be a big success. So we're way behind that. Ready? Sorry, I have to pee. Okay, go. Professional accomplishment. Sommelier certificate. Just about. It was a big deal for me. It was a big hurdle. But, you know, if I look back at what are some of my favorite moment of this presentation was the Saving Private Ryan thing, for sure. I like to. I know that's not a big professional accomplishment. My career just sort of went along. I mean, I always had my eye on the prize, right? I mean, I was always, if you paid attention, you started as a busboy, and you go there and you go there and you go there, and assistant department head, assistant manager, and that's where I am now. And I'm not going anywhere else. You know, I'm 59 years old. Nobody's hiring me as the next manager of the Dubai whatever, you know. And so, and I get that, and that's okay with me. And so I want to diversify and do some other stuff, and part of it is giving back, as I'm doing here today, for instance. You know, and you did too, and that makes me feel good. And the sommelier thing was a huge thing for me. Yeah. Anybody? Hmm? Sorry.
You spoke way back in the presentation. You said that.
Way back. Thanks for saying it like that. I know it was long, wasn't it? Jeez. Well, 40 years. I mean, really.
You said that the long stay
Mm-hmm.
market
Yeah.
is standard down.
Well, figuratively.
As to why you think that is and how you've had to adapt your strategies.
Yeah, I wish I could say that we had adapted by now, but we haven't really. And well, as it's very difficult to adapt to the conditions these days anyway. But with respect to the long stay market, when you call it a dying market, it sort of is, not only figuratively but actually. I mean, as people pass on their health issues, that kind of stuff, there's nobody there to take their place, basically. You know, I mean, at my age even, I'm never thinking of spending a month in Victoria. I mean, really, you know, what am I going to do in February? Walk out in the rain every day at 10 o'clock in the morning, and come back, you know, and walk out again at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, go shopping. I mean, it's the whole thing has changed. So people's mindset has changed. When they say, you know, 70 is the new 50, that kind of stuff, I don't believe it for a minute. But anyway, no, it's true. They do different stuff, and also part of that market is got to do with the dollar, right? So if you're pretty convinced that you're not going to have the big heart attack, you know, when you're down in Arizona, wouldn't it be better to be down in Arizona? You know, especially if your dollar was worth more. So, how to combat that? Everybody's going after winter business. We're back to square one. You know, we'll still have some of that long stay business, but you have to be more creative. So, and it's going to be a tough road to hoe for, I don't know, a number of years from now. Oh, okay. No, this gentleman was first here.
You said tourism season gone. Is there any talk on what you're going to do next?
What I'm going to do next? Just sit back and watch. Yeah, well, there is talk now with the new Minister of Tourism, and it's not only the Minister of Tourism, he's the Minister of Silly Walks and Tourism and stuff, I don't know. What is he the Minister of? Jobs and Innovation. See, I should know that, I met him already. I don't pay attention. But there is talk about reviving some sort of arm's length agency to take the place of it, because it was a really contentious issue, and it's very arrogant for any government. You can edit that too. Very arrogant, though, I'll say it again, for any government to assume that they can take over the marketing of the province with any type of a long-term plan, right? By their very nature, they could be gone in whenever the next election is, you know, so 3 years from now or something, if they hang on that long. So how can you have any type of long-term marketing plan? They need to move this out of the government into the private sector. So, and I think they realize that. I think finally the lights come on. Brian? Sorry? Yeah, let's hope it comes on soon. You're absolutely right.
I have a question about the partnerships you've had with the museum. You said that was the peak.
Hmm. Yeah.
One of the things that helps people, for example, the winter season.
I don't know if there's any solid partnership with them apart from you know, sitting down at the destination marketing committee table and stuff like that. They've got representatives. We got representatives. We understand how important it is, to the extent that was how the Hotel Association of Greater Victoria was sort of formed. We were actually an arm of, and still are, an arm of the BC Hotel Association. But we were getting asked for money all the time, and so we decided to set up a formula to fund ourselves. And one of the first asks was, that we fund the museum because they were cut off once again of their funding from the province or whatever, and they were going to form a committee to go out and find the next blockbuster exhibit. And so we funded that, but it petered out after a while. So not our fault necessarily. We were just the money feeding it. It was originally driven a bit by Tourism Victoria, but it sort of went off the rails. So it's disturbing. I mean, disturbing when something like this, the Chinese exhibit, the Terracotta Army exhibit, gets canceled out. I mean, that because guaranteed it's a revenue generator. It's an economic stimulus. So, there you go. Anybody? Margaret?
I was curious to ask you about having sort of multi-generations in your hotel. You mentioned you have a lot of
Long-term staff.
Long-term staff. I wasn't going to say old-timers, but
No, you'd have to be very careful with that because there's only one person in there that's older than me. So, carry on.
But how do you manage, and maybe you can make some recommendations, to the interns as they go out into the industry of dealing with people that are, have been in a hotel for a really long time and they have their set ways and they're really attached to that hotel and you're coming in as a Gen Y and trying to deal with that.
In a management position?
Yeah, moving into management.
Yeah, I told you I wasn't good at the technical questions, but thanks for asking. It's all about respect, really. I mean, you have to respect the fact that they've been there a long time. You have to respect the fact that they've been loyal to the place that now employs you and signs your paycheck. And you can't be. I think you have to be very patient in trying to make changes. And of course, you should make changes. I mean, that's what you should do. And you should improve the operation, but I think you have to ease it in, and it has to be done in a tactful manner and with respect. So, yeah. We done? Okay. Apparently.
You mentioned that one of the important things to your leader is the good team. Your past career path, how did you choose that team? What types of team members were you looking at?
Well, as I said before, I mean, and I truly believe that's a philosophy. Hire the smile, train the skill. Get rid of the people that aren't going to play the game, who aren't engaged, who aren't interacting with your guests properly. It's all about the guests. I mean, at the end of the day, as I say to them, I mean, we don't have anything else. We've got this lovely building, and we've got some nice views. Big deal, We don't have a Bengal lounge, and we don't have a Lure restaurant, and we don't have a Grand Pacific Athletic Club. I mean, we're just a building at the end of the day with nice views. Well, that doesn't cut it. And so you have to engage those guests, and you have to be not on stage. I don't want you to be on stage. I want you to be natural. I want you to be pleasant. Learn your job enough, or be trained enough and learn your job enough that you're not staring at a computer screen all the time, and that you're actually talking to the guests. And when the guest walks up to you, you're standing there and you're engaged with the guests. That's all it's all about, right? Okay.
Great. Well, we'll wrap it up. Amanda.
I'll pay all the parking fines. Sorry I ran on a little bit late. It's a long time.
Thank you so much, Earl.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Thank you.
All right, so on behalf of our class, I'd like to thank you for coming out, spending some time with us, sharing with us your background and some experiences you have in the industry. I'm sure everybody enjoyed the presentation as well as they took away some insight from it. So
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bottle of wine? 2 small bottles of wine. Cool.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
For coming out.
Thanks.